So let's go a little bit deeper into what mindfulness is. So I like to separate mindfulness into two kind of buckets, because usually the term, it's become almost meaningless at this point. Like I hear people saying, oh, mindfulness, that's like be here now, right? Kind of. I mean, that's a nice side effect. Here's some things I think will actually help you understand what you're doing when you're practicing. So being mindful is being aware, which, is anyone here not aware right now? So we all have this quality, right? We agree on that. With a small caveat, we're being aware without being identified with our thinking. Now, for most of us, I think if we really reflect, when I ask people this, it's usually about 95% of the time we're identified with our thinking. And there's some research on this too, that about 95% of our activities are just completely habitual. We're doing them essentially unconsciously. I'm sure you've all experienced something like this, right? Where you've driven a car for 2 or 3 minutes and you wake up and you realize, I do not remember driving the car. In fact, I just passed my exit, right? Now that's an extreme example, but there are more subtle levels of this that we're spending about 95% of our time like this. So the mindfulness means we have awareness, and again, we're seeing our thinking objectively. Instead of being our thinking, instead of identifying with our thinking, we're seeing it. Oh, here's a thought about this. Here's an inner dialogue about this, so on and so forth. Now mindfulness, and in case that sounds a little bit foreign to you, this is something you're already doing. You do this all the time. But like, when's the last time, I'm sure this happened maybe in the last week or so, you were about to say something, and then you realized like, oh, that's not very skillful. Maybe I shouldn't say that out loud, and you didn't say it. That is mindfulness, right? You couldn't do that unless you had an objective view of your thinking. If you were being your thinking, it would have just come right out, and you would have offended somebody and had to ask forgiveness. So this is something you're already doing. The trick here is, for most of us, it happens kind of on accident, and it doesn't sustain itself for very long. So what mindfulness practices are about, and we'll go through a few of them today, are skillful means for being mindful more often and on demand whenever you want to, and then also being able to sustain it. Because it's pretty easy to be mindful if you're just on the beach somewhere, going for a walk in the woods. It's a little bit trickier if you're having a heated discussion with a team or with a family member. And so with training, you can actually develop the ability to have that objective view of things, even when things are pretty sticky, when they're pretty hot. Now, one idea on what mindfulness is not, because if you just remember anything about mindfulness, hopefully this is one thing, because this will save you a lot of stress. Mindfulness training is not focus training. You're not trying to focus your attention on an object, whether internal or external. Focus develops. It's an absolute side effect. This does happen. You will become less distracted and more focused as a result of mindfulness training. But your effort while training is not to try to focus. In fact, I dare say, at the risk of making you too lazy here, it's more of like just relaxing at the beach a little bit. The effort is to remember to try, and then once you remember to try, it's really just to kind of relax a little bit, okay? So here's the general process that we're talking about. So the first thing that's going to happen is, I'm sure we've all been distracted by our thinking to the point where we drive by an exit or we forget our keys somewhere or whatever. So the first thing that happens is you notice that you're identified with thinking, maybe even to the point where you're distracted. It's okay. Don't beat yourself up. This happens to everyone, even people who've been practicing for well over a decade with 10,000 hours of training. This still happens. So, but once you notice, there's your opportunity. There's your window. Once you notice that, oh yeah, I was caught in thinking or maybe even distracted, the second thing you do is you're turning your attention very gently towards yourself. So, and this can be as simple as, you could try this right now, of just noting your current posture. So you could just kind of mentally note in your mind, sitting in the chair right now. And as soon as you do that, I guarantee you none of you were distracted by thinking in that first second, right? Now, if we were to do that and I just said, okay, just sit for 5 minutes, you're going to be gone in like 45 seconds, right? Off in someplace. But the moment you just recognize your posture, that's where that objectivity is, right there. You're actually seeing both your mind and your body objectively. And that's the next step in the process here, is not to judge yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Just be really honest about what's actually there. Whether it's a good thought or a bad thought, whether it's a pleasant emotion or an unpleasant emotion, the core element, really the key to being successful with mindfulness training is to allow whatever's there to be there. Not trying to get rid of it, not trying to change it, not trying to judge it, just objectively observing, oh, there's anger in the body right now. In fact, you might even get curious about it. What is it like? Which is how you sustain it. So this is where it actually becomes kind of fun, is that to sustain mindfulness is, again, it's pretty effortless. All you have to do is just be curious about your experience. Any of you who have seen small children realize they are masters at mindfulness, minus emotional regulation, because that part of the brain hasn't developed yet. But you'll see a small child, I mean, they'll just be like in the middle of something, and then like the coolest little, the most minor little thing happens, like, I don't know, a bird flies by, and they'll just be like, oh, look, a bird. And then they'll just drop that and like, oh, look, a rock. You know, and they're just always with like what's happening right now. Because they're just curious. And if you have this attitude of curiosity, this will make your mindfulness practice so much easier. Instead of beating yourself up if there's just negative thoughts coming up over and over again, to just be curious about it. Like, okay, what are these negative thoughts that are coming up? How long are they going to be there? Well, let me just sit and watch. Are they still there? No? Oh, no, they're back. That's okay. Are they still there now? So that you just, with this attitude of curiosity, it becomes very, very easy. So what I'd like you to think of in terms of training mindfulness is that it's less of something that you have to go get and attain. It's actually like breaking a bad habit and remembering something that is your birthright. Like, you were born really good at this, like a child. And then society conditions us to think that our thinking is way more important than what's actually happening. And little by little, we get removed from the world and we start living in this world in between our ears. Right? So you were born really good at being mindful, and we've just developed this habit of identifying with our thinking all the time. And so really the practice is about just recognizing that it's natural, and gradually breaking that habit. So here's an example of the habit that I'm sure we can all relate to. So let's say you're in a meeting like this one with a team or something, and then the thought about vacation comes up, right? You're like, oh, no, I'm in a meeting, I gotta get back. You really try to stay there, and then vacation gets a little bit more tempting, and you really start thinking about it, and then you're like, no, I gotta stay in the meeting, and then bam, you're gone, right? And so you're on the beach in the Caribbean or something, and you're really enjoying it, and then another thought comes up, then distracts you about puppy unicorns. And you're like, yeah, I know puppy unicorns are really cute, but I just want to enjoy the beach. Can I for once be free from my thinking? And then because they're so cute, it comes back up, and you're like, no, I just want to enjoy the beach. And then before you know it, bam, you're just totally sucked into how cute puppy unicorns are. And then you wake up, and you're, oh yeah, I'm in a meeting, and 2 minutes have gone by, and you have no idea what anyone has said. Has that happened to anyone here besides me? Okay, so I'm not the only one. That's good. Just out of curiosity, does it happen to anyone during this talk so far? No? No? Okay. If it did, if it happened, I'm not upset with you at all. This is totally natural. So what we're doing here, again, we're not trying to get rid of thinking. We're not trying to push thoughts out. Thoughts are very, very useful. We need these things. What we're trying to do is it's kind of like, you know, we have our thinking up on a heads-up display. It's almost like our relationship with our devices. You know, most people are so attached to the devices, it's almost like they're identified with them. I mean, the distance between a ding and a reaction is like nothing, right? It's like, oh, text, woo, you know, it's almost like it's part of you. So it's almost like if you could imagine anyone that you've seen that's like that, just being able to place your iPhone down and saying like, no, that's not me. That is just something that I can use when it's useful, and when I don't need it, it doesn't have to control me. This is the relationship we're developing with thinking. Like, thinking is a very useful tool, but it shouldn't run the show.